Welcome in, everybody, to the Flagship podcast. We are live on the Horns 24/7 YouTube channel. I am Chip Brown of Horns247.com, joined by the managing editor of Horns 24/7, Taylor Estes. Taylor, it is Monday after the Super Bowl. You had the Kansas City Chiefs taking down the Philadelphia Eagles in a battle of former Big 12 quarterbacks, and Patrick Mahomes gets it done. He had one incompletion in the second half of that game. I don't know what happened to the Philadelphia Eagles defense, but the Kansas City Chiefs win Super Bowl 57. What'd you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think I saw something this morning that I think this was the first Super Bowl ever where a team had a double-digit lead at halftime and lost the Super Bowl. I saw that somewhere on social media, which is interesting because I feel like Texas fans can understand how that must feel because Texas had those issues in year one under Steve Sarkisian. They did clean it up, but yeah, I thought it was a good game. Patrick Mahomes and Jalen Hurts both played really well and couldn't ask for. I love when Super Bowls are close. I don't want to see some blowout in the Super Bowl, where you care more about the commercials than you do at the actual game. So I thought it was a good game. What were your thoughts?
Yeah, and Shane Buechele gets a Super Bowl ring as a member of the Kansas City Chiefs. He's the third string quarterback behind Mahomes and Chad Henne. And happy for Shane Buechele, who good guy, good quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of reminds me of Garrett Gilbert
When he was with the Patriots, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
He was the third team quarterback with the Patriots, got a Super Bowl ring. So that's cool. And it was a busy weekend for Texas basketball. The Texas men take down West Virginia in a blowout, 94-60, and they're playing at Texas Tech tonight. I'm sure we'll have some questions about that. We are taking your questions, doing a live mailbag flagship podcast here today. So fire away. And the Texas women also won over the weekend, took down TCU, their second game without third leading scorer Sonia Morris. And you've got a doubleheader tonight on TV. You've got the Texas women taking on Iowa State on ESPN2 at 6 o'clock. And then at 8 o'clock, you've got the Texas men taking on Texas Tech in Lubbock, their Texas men's third straight Big Monday appearance, 8 o'clock on ESPN. So they're both atop the Big 12 standings, the Texas men and women. It's been a really fun Big 12 season to cover so far with those teams overcoming early adversity for different reasons. The women because of injuries, the men because Chris Beard was dismissed from the team, but they are getting it done. And so we'll see how they do tonight. Both of them are on the road. So Taylor, you ready to get to some of these questions?
Yeah, if you have questions, we have a lot of football talk coming up today. So go ahead and in the comments on YouTube or on the Horns 24/7 Facebook channel. We will try to get to everybody's comments, but let's start off with some football talk, Chip. And I'm going to start with a question from Horns 24/7 member Duke 24/7. Do we have an official health status on Jalen Catalon yet? Any limitations? Jalen Catalon being the transfer from Arkansas. He's, was an all SEC player, has had some injuries in his career, but his ceiling is very, very high. This could be a guy with a good season and a healthy season, could be a one and done transfer for Texas. Chip, your thoughts?
Yeah, from what I'm understanding, he's certainly taking part in winter conditioning, and he's, from what I'm told, has no restrictions from that standpoint. Now, whether the coaches want to put him through the physical contact or keep him out of some of the physical contact, during spring ball. We'll find out from Steve Sarkisian, but right now he's a full participant in winter workouts, which is great news for Texas, the team, the coaches, the fans, because we know Jalen Catalon, when he's healthy, he was an all SEC safety,
Right.
and he got it early, and can process and diagnose and all the things you want from that safety position. So you're knocking on wood that Jalen Catalon just continues to get stronger, and uh, all conditioned here going into spring ball, so that his season here with the Texas Longhorns can be a successful and productive one. We've compared him to Ryan Watts, who came in from Ohio State and made an immediate impact. Ryan Watts was running first team boundary corner from pretty much the time he got on campus, and played the whole season there, and certainly handled his position as well as you could have expected or wanted from a transfer coming in. So if Jalen Catalon could do something similar for Texas, that would be fantastic, especially with the loss of Anthony Cook. You need a veteran presence back there. You got a lot of young, talented safeties, a couple of whom aren't even on campus yet, who can learn from that leadership experience, um, and so it could benefit Texas tremendously having Jalen Catalon in here.
Yeah, for sure. And, you hope that he has, if you're a Texas fan, you hope he kind of has a season similar to Jordan Whittington. There was always injury questions plaguing Jordan Whittington. He worked overtime essentially in the training room to get his body right. And for the first time had, a one complete healthy season at Texas. You would hope to see that from Jalen Catalon. And this is a guy, again, I mean, Chip, you bring up a good point. His veteran and leadership can be really substantial for the secondary, especially with him being alongside Jaron Thompson. Jaron Thompson is a guy that, at the end of last season, people pointed to as someone who could be a vocal leader on the defense. And with Jalen Catalon, the two of them can provide, really a lot of leadership and experience to the secondary, because Anthony Cook played in a lot of games. He didn't talk a lot. We'll say that he was a little bit more of a quiet guy, but he played, and I mean, since his freshman year, and losing that type of experience can be, detrimental sometimes. But having a guy like Jalen Catalon come in, hope he stays healthy. That could be, as you said, just like how Ryan Watts kind of was last year. And if you're a Texas fan, you're probably praying, that is the case, because the Texas defense could be a strength of the team again with the way that this defense is shaping up.
Yeah, I mean, Anthony Cook, that's a significant loss. He made some big plays, especially early in the season. I mean, he had a big stop on 4th and 1 against Alabama. He had a big stop against Iowa State that caused a fumble when Iowa State was driving for a potential go-ahead touchdown. That fumble was recovered by Jalen Ford, and Texas ended up winning the game. I mean, it was a game changing play, and Texas needs that. They need more turnovers forced by the secondary. You had uh, a big time year from Jade Barron, and Deshaun Jameson had a pick six early in the year. Of course, Jalen Ford led the team in interceptions, but there wasn't a lot of interceptions from the safety position. And so we'll see if Jalen Catalon and Jaron Thompson can mesh well together and create some more turnovers for a Texas defense that returns veteran experience at every level of the defense. So this is I'm intrigued. I mean, Catalan to me is a huge pickup if he can stay healthy, and we know that Torrey Becton and his staff did a great job with Jordan Whittington last year, it required extra work from Jordan Whittington. It still does. And Jalen Catalon's doing the same thing. So um, it there's reason for optimism right now.
Yeah, and I will say with Tori Becton and the strength and conditioning staff, there was a lot of people, in year one that they were questioning if the late game fall off was a product of a poor strength and conditioning program. And I would say they were the unsung heroes of last season, Chip. I mean, think about how much better this team was from year one to year two, how much better it looked, even, I would say, from a physical standpoint. And they played really physical too. I mean, they don't get a lot of mention, but they should, because Tori Becton did a phenomenal job. That is why Steve Sarkisian went after Tori Becton to come to Texas, and that was a huge hire, I think, and one that people didn't appreciate year one, but you saw the results year two, and that's what I think that they deserve a ton of credit for what the team was last season too.
Yeah, typically you can maybe bring the strength um, program into question if you're suffering a lot of soft tissue injuries, a
Right.
lot of hamstring, a lot of pulls, a lot of stuff like that. And you didn't have that last
Not at
year.
all.
So, and as we mentioned with Jordan Whittington, um, it some guys are tight. And like we've mentioned, CJ Baxter, the freshman 5-star running back, is tight. He's got tight hamstrings. He had, some issues in a couple of his high school seasons there at Edgewater and Orlando. He's doing extra work with the training staff to make sure that he's as flexible as he can be. And so um, we're watching that with Jalen Catalon as well.
Yeah. All right. Next one here from Horns 24/7 member BW Brew 16. With Savion Red moving to running back, what past Longhorn at the running back position do you think his game mimics? And who in the NFL can we draw a comparison to? Chip, I'll let you go first there.
Yeah, I mean, he's he's probably, and I want to see him run at the college level, but he's probably a cross between Hodges Mitchell and Fozzie Whitaker.
Hmm.
And again, you want to see him with a big sample size because obviously Hodges Mitchell and Fozzie were really productive. Hodges was so tough. My gosh, he was a kind of built like Savion Red, little, stocky, thick, uh, and could he could take a punch. He had some, he would go between the tackles, and he took some big hits, and he always, got up. And Fozzie had the knee injury, and when he was healthy, obviously he was productive. Ended up having a more productive NFL career than he did at Texas. But the thing I like most about Savion Red is his attitude. I mean, he loves football. He loves being on the field with his teammates. He wants to have an impact as soon as he can. So whatever that takes, and that's what we're seeing here with this move, because he was a guy who was getting on the field even though not many receivers were getting on the field outside of uh, Xavier Worthy, Jordan Whittington, um, and Casey Kane. But Savion Red was getting on the field a bit, and obviously they brought in a bunch of really talented receivers with A.D. Mitchell coming in from Georgia, Jonte Cook, DeAndre Moore, already on campus as early enrollees, highly recruited receivers. And obviously with Brennan Thompson getting another year of experience, uh, we know that Sarkisian loves speed. And so, maybe it's harder for Savion Red to get on the field at the receiver position. He's like, let me show you what I can do at running back. And I think that's great. I mean, obviously they're down numbers right now with Jonathan Brooks. Um, you know, you've got Jaden Blue and CJ Baxter, but like we said, in spring, you've got two fields going. You need running backs on both fields. You need to have at least four who are scholarship and not walk-ons. And so Um, I would say that. I would say a little cross between Hodges Mitchell and Fozzie Whitaker. And then let's see. Let's see how um, how he's running the football against obviously much better competition than what he saw in high school.
Yeah, and that's it's a little tricky at this point to say exactly who his game mimics because we haven't seen his game, at this level, playing running back. From a just a physical standpoint, he kind of is like a Malcolm Brown, maybe, like his body structure, his size. I mean, when you see Savion Red, I remember being at fall, I think it was fall camp practice last season or prior to last season, and Chip kept saying like, "Man, he looks like a linebacker almost out there, like not really a receiver." And I would say from just a physical stature type of presence, I would say Malcolm Brown, but it's going to be difficult to kind of definitively say at this point because we haven't seen him at the position.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
Uh,
another fun wrinkle that we'll be watching in spring ball.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Next one here is from Horns 24/7 member Horn KC. Is this the best wide receiver group we've had since the championship years? I'm going to go and say probably. I mean, I think that in 2018 Texas was pretty stacked at receiver with Colin Johnson, Devin Duvernay, Lil Jordan Humphrey. Those three really had a huge impact on the team. But from a depth and just overall talent perspective, it's hard not to think that, Chip. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree here because you have some resume from Isaiah Nair and AD Mitchell from their previous schools that tells you, okay, these guys can get it done. I mean, Isaiah Nair, I get he played at Wyoming, but 12 touchdown catches on a predominantly run oriented team is significant and legitimate. I mean, double digit touchdown receptions at any Division 1 school in one season is big time. When you combine the fact that he wants to be great, and then you add in AD Mitchell, who's had a touchdown in 4 college football playoff games and 2 national championship games, including and he had the go ahead game winning touchdown against Ohio State in the semifinal. He had another touchdown in the blowout win over TCU. But when you factor those things in, along with Xavier Worthy, who broke all the freshman records here, Jordan Whittington, who I think will become more utilized as Quinn Ewers gets more comfortable in this offense and seeing the field and telling Steve Sarkisian what he's comfortable with. And then you add in Jonte Cook and DeAndre Moore. Ryan Niblett's not even on campus yet, but he's a burner. I think this is, I mean, I wrote about this in the Insider a couple weeks ago that this year's offense, the 2023 offense, should more closely resemble what Sarkisian was working with at Alabama. I'm not saying these guys are Jalen Waddle, Jerry Jeudy, Devontae Smith, Henry Ruggs, who did all play on the same team together and were all productive, but it's closer, and that's key. Steve Sarkisian wants speed on both sides of the field, preferably in both outside receivers and the slot, so that the defense has to back up and and fear them going deep. And we know Steve Sarkisian is not afraid to throw it deep. So I think this has a chance to be a really special group of receivers. Maybe,
Ye-
I like the group you mentioned, Taylor. And
mhm.
um, it was a weird time under Tom Herman because he had Devin Duvernay on the bench for his in 2017. But um, that was a really good, productive group with a veteran quarterback, and Quinn Ewers should start to feel like a more veteran quarterback in 2023, or there might be something wrong, with the development process. So yeah, I think this is going to be a special group. And you
Yeah.
got size too. I mean, AD Mitchell 6'4" with that long wingspan. Isaiah Nayer, 6'3", with that long wingspan. Those are quarterbacks' best friends, man. Big receivers where you can just throw it up and they can go up and get it. Those kinds of receivers clean up a lot of mistakes, a lot of, errant throws, and that's good news for Quinn Ewers or whoever's taking the snaps for Texas.
Yeah, and like you say with, Quinn Ewers being another year in the system, I mean, in 2018, that was Sam Ellinger's second year in the system as the starting quarterback. You expect him to make progress. There's really no reason to think he's not going to take that next step, just because we've seen the highs, that Quinn Ewers can bring to the table. Obviously, there were some lows, but that was a freshman first-time starter, hadn't played football basically 2 years. So, yeah, I think him taking that next step is only going to make these guys better. And it is good to have the big bodies. That wasn't really something he had a ton of last year. I mean, Jatavian Sanders, a tight end, obviously kind of had to fill that role, but you're not really throwing jump balls to a tight end in the end zone very often. That's a rare situation for it to happen. So, I totally agree. I think that having the bigger bodies plus the speed is huge. And that, I think going to pay dividends for Texas, the offense too, and will take a lot of pressure off of the running game as well. With is going to, the running back room very talented, but there's going to be first time starters and first time contributors really that probably are going to be seeing the field. So you may not have to rely as heavily on that as you did, last season with Bijan Robinson and Roshan Johnson.
Yeah.
All right, let's get to a YouTube channel question. This is from, I apologize in advance if I butcher anyone's names. I am, very known for butchering these names on the show when we do these live mailbags, so apologies. But from Frank Decluet, sorry if I'm messing that up. Frank D here says,
Frank D.
is it Big 12 champ or bust for Sark this year?
I certainly think it's Big 12 title game or bust. And, you know, I have to think that Texas is one of the top two teams in the Big 12 this year. And we'll see how other teams come together, how they gel. Obviously, TCU's got a lot to replace. K-State has some key playmakers to replace on both sides of the ball. Those are the two who played for it all last year, with K-State winning it, winning the Big 12 championship. So, you know, I have to think that it's Big 12 title game or bust for Sark this year. And based on the returning players, maybe Big 12 championship or bust. I mean, obviously, um, Oklahoma got on that roll and continued to carry the flag for the Big 12 really from 2009 until the run ended with Lincoln Riley going to USC. Um, obviously Bob Stoops was in there for a good chunk of it, but I've said this before and I'll continue to say it. The top end coaches reveal themselves in the first 3 years on the job, and this will be year 3 for Sarkisian. And I think he absolutely needs to be in that Big 12 title game with the talent he has, the way he's been recruiting. That I can't think of two schools right now who would be ahead of Texas to get to the Big 12 championship game, just based on what I've seen of their returning players, their transfers. So yeah, I'm going to say Big 12 title game or bust for sure. How about
Yeah,
you,
I
Taylor?
I agree with that. I think, and this is something that we've talked about this in the past on the Flagship podcast. This is something I can never really recall saying in my career covering Texas, just because I haven't felt that rosters were set up in that way. And I do think, maybe 2020 was probably the closest that I thought should have been, but obviously they fell short that year. It was a weird season anyway. But yeah, I think I agree with you. I wouldn't say championship yet until we can see kind of some of the product here, but I definitely think it is a Big 12 title game or bust year for Sark. And I think he recognizes that. I think Sark, he's a smart guy. You know, he knows the expectations are very high. He has talked openly about that. Like, he knew what he was getting into when he was coming to a place like Texas to be a head coach. And he knows the expectations are really high, and he understands why they are. And so I think he knows that it's probably a Big 12 championship or title game or bust type of year for him. And just look at the roster. I mean, my goodness, that's the biggest, not just the skill talent, but the guys that they have in the trenches and that are returning from last year's team. You know, the offensive line is going to be 1 year older. You know, that was a very young group that exceeded expectations, at least my expectations in 2022. I think just everything is lining up for this to be a team that could be really special. Now, there's some questions. There's some, some veteran experience that they do have to replace at various positions, but I think they have the guys to do it. And I haven't said that I can recall ever in my career covering Texas. But the way that they are developing, you know, offensive line, defensive line, especially, that's where you win and lose games. And Texas is finally at a position where they have not just bodies, but they have quality depth, and they have a lot of talent in the at both on both lines of scrimmage. And so that really can pay dividends for a team. And so, yeah, I think there's really no reason why Texas shouldn't be in the Big 12 title game, barring some crazy injuries like to Quinn Ewers or something like that, you know. But at this point, as is, yeah, I think that's fair to say.
Yeah, and we should see they've been lacking a consistent edge rusher who can get quarterbacks on the ground. Although Texas did a nice job of pressuring quarterbacks last year, they need to have that guy who you fear, who offenses have to account for, have to figure out ways to double team, and we'll see if Barron Sorrell, Justice Finkley, um, Ethan Burke, Colton Vasek, if these guys can develop into Jure Bledsoe, um, Jamon Tapp, can one or more of these guys emerge to where you're getting a consistent pass rush on those big play downs, those big money downs, third down, fourth down against Texas Tech, to keep teams from sustaining drives. And so that's exciting. I mean, the talent is there. It needs time to develop. Um, Sometimes you end up with a freak like Tony Brackens at Texas back in the early 90s, who was just born to rush the passer, country strong from Fairfield, Texas. And the guy was a monster from the beginning and right into the NFL. So that's what Texas needs to add defensively. But they'll move Anthony Hill around. I mean, I think, and I'm kind of getting ahead of myself here. We haven't even seen him in spring ball, but I know the coaches are excited. He's driven, and he's got the body and the mind and the pedigree from what he was able to do at Denton Ryan to come in and be an impact player as a freshman. So it's exciting.
Yeah, for sure. It's funny because listed off all of the names of the edge rushers that we were going to be watching. When was the last time that you sat there and, like, just off the top of your head listed 5 guys that you think could be impact edge rushers at Texas? I mean, that in itself shows how develop or how deep, that this team is, and how well the staff has done recruiting across the board. And I thought that was something funny. I'm sitting there thinking, like, yeah, we can keep going too. Like Ethan Burke. I mean, you, like, literally the list goes on and on and on. And that's a credit to the staff of what they're doing to develop this team and to build it, not just for this season, but to sustain in the SEC when Texas does end up going in 2024. Because you need big bodies in the trenches. There's a reason why Sark talks about big humans. It's not just a funny little slogan. He says it's because he knows, and Kyle Flood knows, and a lot of the staff here that have coached in the SEC, Bo Davis knows, that is how you win championships. It starts and ends pretty much in the trenches. So lot of big humans on this roster that could be an impact this season. All right, let's go to this next one from Horns 24/7 member. It's a mystery. By the way, I really like that username. That was one of the first times I've seen it. I was like, ooh, that's clever. So it's a mystery. It says, glad we are leaving the Big 12. Is LHN still be negotiated item between Texas and ESPN, or was the reduction of fees considered payment in kind?
Yeah, so we've talked about this a little bit, but the Longhorn Network as we know it is going to go away, and it will become part of the SEC network. The question is, with adding Texas and Oklahoma, who each had their own third tier channel. Oklahoma's was with Fox. Texas obviously was with ESPN. Do they add a SEC network too? And that's what sort of remains to be seen. We haven't heard from ESPN on this, but Chris Del Conte did say last week, he was on the radio here in Austin, and he said, you'll still get all your baseball and softball games. So I don't know. That sounds to me like there would be maybe an SEC network too, or or something, because you're now going to 16 schools, and that's a lot of baseball games, folks, to be having to account for. So it's a little bit of remains to be seen, but yeah, a part of the reason that Texas is getting out for 50 million when it could have been well over 100 million based on the bylaws and the grant of rights that for leaving 1 year early. It's they're getting out for 50 million in large part because ESPN is motivated to have Texas and Oklahoma in the SEC in 2024 when ESPN takes over the broadcast rights to SEC football. So, people kind of dog on the Longhorn Network, but it was easy. It was an easy punching bag when Texas wasn't winning, when they weren't
Right.
good enough. The Shaka Smart years in basketball, um, the lean years for Texas baseball, and obviously for Texas football. It was a reminder of how those teams were not doing well, and so you had better love looking back at games in the 80s and 90s. The Texas History Channel is sort of kind of what it became known as. But the better these teams are, softball, baseball, basketball, football, obviously, the more you appreciate LHN. And unfortunately, that will be one of the casualties of this move.
Yeah, I think it's kind of sad for the other sports. I think it was definitely a huge punching bag for football because especially when they would put games on the network and there's fan bases elsewhere. They're like, how the hell do I watch Longhorn Network? Like it's nowhere to be found anywhere, and so I think that made it a punching bag, but it did offer a lot of other sports at Texas to be spotlighted. They, and women's sports, some of the ones that don't get as much attention as football, basketball, baseball. That's disappointing for the student athletes, and you would hope that with the SEC, having a 16 team league, maybe they do the SEC too, network or something like that to allow for that to happen, because it's not as much as football drives everything, especially in the state of Texas and in with the University of Texas and in the SEC. It's still there's still other sports that deserve some type of attention, and that was something Longhorn Network could provide to some of the non-revenue sports. So it'll be interesting to see with the SEC how they kind of manage that. All right, Chip, from this one from Horns 24/7 member, I know for sure I'm going to butcher this one. Packin R 46. What's the level of scrutiny Sarkisian will get for the results of this season?
Well, listen, Texas fans are not shy about expressing their opinion, and most of them have a memory back to 2005. Not all. Got some young fans out there, but they know what Alabama's been doing, what Clemson's been doing, what Ohio State's been doing, and that Lincoln Riley went to USC, took over a team that was, um, you know, that fired its coach and was one win away from being in the college football playoff. So it's it's time. Let's put it that way. I
Yeah,
mean, the level of scrutiny is going to go up.
right.
Coming off a 5-7 season, we we here at the Flagship Podcast, we're saying 8 wins would be, um, you could claim progress, and 8 wins in Arch Manning. I said all going into the season, and then they got 8 wins in Arch Manning. Well, now it's 10 wins and an appearance in the Big 12 championship game. But Texas could have and should have and would have been in the Big 12 championship game if they'd have just kept running the football in the fourth quarter of the Oklahoma State game. So, yeah, the level of scrutiny's going up, and this is where we'll find out what Steve Sarkisian is made of, because this is a tough job. It's There are a lot of expectations. There were some questions about how he called that game, the Texas Tech game, offensively. There were issues, defensively as well, but the firepower on offense last year to be able to run the football, we saw it time and again. They finished games against Iowa State and Baylor by running the football. Kansas, they just ran over Kansas, and that is a concern for me,
Mhm.
because of the unknowns. I think there's a bunch of talent at running back, but there was a bunch of talent at running back last year, and Steve Sarkisian didn't run it. So that's a concern. And yeah, the scrutiny level is going to go up. It's now where Texas needs to be in that championship conversation every year. What do you
Yeah,
think,
and I
Taylor?
think I agree, and I think that it also probably doesn't help from the fan perspective that the last 2 Big 12, you know, championship games, there was a coach that was in his second year that won in 2021 in Dave Aranda. And then last year, a first year head coach at TCU, their only loss of before the college football playoff was in the Big 12 title game. And then they still went to the college football playoff. And so the fact that there are, fresh coaches at schools that have at least made it to the Big 12 title game in either year one or year two only adds to the scrutiny, I think, among the Texas fan base. And it makes sense. I mean, it's not like it was one thing when OU was just constantly running the table in the Big 12. It was kind of like, well, no one else is winning it too, but the fact that the last 2 years have seen first year coaches in it and then a second year coach actually win it, I think that only adds to the level of scrutiny. And what you said earlier, Chip, is right. Year three, you'll learn who the coach is within the first 3 years, but good or bad. And so we know we know he's a good coach. We know he's one of the best offensive minds in college football. Um, his TBD is still him as a head coach, and I think that's what you're going to learn a lot about him this season.
Yeah, yeah. His best season as a college head coach is 9 wins at USC in 2014, the year before he was let go there. So he's got to break through some glass ceilings. But we've seen guys like Dabo Sweeney do it.
Mhm.
Dabo had a rough first year at Clemson, changed out Billy Napier as his offensive coordinator, um, and got it right, got it going. And by year three, Clemson was a team that was starting to win ACC championships, and the rest is history. We talked about Mac Brown. Mac Brown went to the Big 12 title game in 1999, his second year as coach. They lost to Nebraska but he was in the championship game, and then was back in it in 2001. I don't need to remind everyone about that one because they won. They beaten Colorado. They'd have played for the national championship against the Miami Hurricanes. But you got to be in that mix on a regular basis, and not having the big dips. And that's that's what we're watching. Right now, Sark's got this thing going like this, and it needs to keep going on that direction and not doing this.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, when you're the highest paid public employee in the state of Texas, there's a lot of expectations that probably follow with success that should follow you too. And so, speaking of, let's go to a YouTube channel question here from CTE11. Do you think there will be pressure for Sark to relinquish play calling duties if the team struggles next year?
I would imagine Sark will know that better than anyone. So far he has said, I, that he wants to call the plays. He loves calling the plays, and I do think that last year was a tough one with a first year quarterback, and and obviously the second half meltdowns that Taylor referenced earlier, from year one and even into year two,
Mhm.
because you had the 31-17 lead at Texas Tech and lost. You had the 31-17 lead at Oklahoma State and lost. And then went to K-State and showed you could win on the road and, hang in a good, I mean, they had to hang on to win it, but they
Yeah.
did. And so, you kind of put that to rest, but you got to keep going, and you got to get that team needs to be mentally tougher, and they need to be able to close out games because no one was giving up leads like that anywhere in college football over that, that 2-year span that it was happening. So, um, if there are big questions about how Sark is handling the offense, and is he getting too vanilla late in big games, tight games, or is he struggling with how to manage the game, then yeah, I think there will be questions, and I'm sure Chris Del Conte will say, "Who do you need to make you feel comfortable about this?" And they'll address it. But I do think that Steve Sarkisian believes this will be the first offense he's had at Texas that can do all the things that he wants it to do. And where he doesn't have to force the ball to Xavier Worthy to get the defenses to respect the deep ball and for the safeties to stay back, that he'll have multiple weapons, who will open things up underneath for guys like Jatavian Sanders and the running backs. And so I think this is a big year for Steve Sarkisian offensively, because the excuses are going away.
Right.
You're going to have experience at quarterback. You're going to have a newcomer at running back in CJ Baxter, but Jonathan Brooks has been around. Keelan Robinson's been around, and these receivers that he's got have done it. They've proven it, whether it was here at Texas or somewhere else.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, I if there are issues or struggles on offense, Sark, this is another thing you're going to learn a lot about him, I think, as a head coach here. He's got to recognize it himself, not be told. You know what I mean? Because I mean, just because you're not calling the like physically calling in the plays on offense doesn't mean it's not his offense. I mean, do you think Nick Saban just doesn't have any input on the Alabama offense? Or no, like he may not be calling the plays, but still you still have an input. You still can run your offense, just have it run by someone else. Because we've talked a lot about this, Chip. There are very few head coaches at the college level that call the offense that have won the national championship. I mean, I can't really recall one. I mean, I know Lincoln Riley has been in national, college football playoff games, but he never even won one. And I don't think that's just some type of like coincidence. I think it's because there's so many things that go into being the play caller on offense. I mean, Steve Sarkisian, that's not just his only responsibilities. When the offense isn't on the field, he's not able to go over and talk to the guys and talk to Quinn Ewers. He has to be watching the defense and has to be, the whole game manager, not just the offensive game manager. And so there's a lot of responsibilities that come with being a head coach and an offensive play caller. And there are very few that can do it at a high level. And so we'll see if he is able to. And if there are struggles, as you said, the excuses are going away. So if the offense is kind of up and down again for the third straight year, he's got to recognize that. And you're right. If he doesn't, Chris Del Conte needs to jump in and be like, you need to get somebody that you trust to call the offense. You can still run your offense, but you need somebody that you can trust to do it, because otherwise he's not going to be a coach at Texas, because the excuses are going away, it seems like, with each year here, because of the way of how well they've developed some guys, how well they've been recruiting. You've got to see improvement from the offensive play calling too. And if you don't, then I think you've got to, do some self-evaluation there and recognize that maybe it's not you saying you're a failure because you can't call the offense. It's you recognizing that there are so many other responsibilities. It's a tough job to do all of them, and plus be the offensive play caller.
Yeah, and Jimbo Fisher was, probably the last head coach who was calling plays to win a national championship when he had Jameis Winston. And Jimbo Fisher just hired Bobby Petrino as his
Yep.
offensive coordinator because it wasn't coming together at A&M.
Mm-hmm.
And so, there's a prime example. I don't think Jimbo was crazy about the idea of giving up play calling, but he did it. Now, Dana Holgerson, now he's never won anything outside of like a 10-win season, but he happily relinquished play calling duties to Jake Spavital when he was at West Virginia. He said it put years back on his life. Now, Sarkisian's been calling plays for so long, he doesn't know what it's like not to call plays. So
Right.
we'll see. We'll see. But this year is a big year for how Sark gets this offense going. Look, averaging 36 points per game is great. He was averaging over 40 points per game at Alabama. And that's a big difference. When you average over 40 points per game, you're scoring a whole heck of a lot more
Yeah.
points. And that's where he wants to be. That's where this offense, if you want to know how this offense is progressing, then watch to see if Texas is able to average more than 40 points per game. That's when that's when the getting's good. And you think back to the Texas National Championship in 05, they averaged 50. So that
Right.
tells you elite is 40 plus. So let's see how Texas does with that this year.
Yeah, for sure. All right, let's go with this one from Horns 24/7 member. It's Hendricks. Can you ballpark the number of transfers out after spring, most likely positions for attrition? This is a tricky one because, Sark is very open with the players that he has, and if they don't see them progressing in a way that they are going to make an impact, he will tell them. So it's going to be interesting. It's hard for me to put a number on it, Chip. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I don't think it's a lot.
I think it
You know,
happened earlier already, right?
right,
Like, yeah, after
right,
the season. Yeah.
right. There were, you know, a good number.
Mhm.
I don't have the list right in front of me, but I want to say 8 to 10, and it was from positions you would expect. I mean, we expected Hudson Card to move on, um, and if you've been in the system a couple years and you're not getting playing time, significant playing time, or you're seeing playing time diminish as new players come in, then it's natural to look at that person, that player, and say, well, maybe they're better off somewhere else. I can look in a guy like Casey Kane Juan Davis at tight end, and let's see where they are in the offense after spring ball. And I'm not saying that that'll happen because Texas they don't have a lot of tight ends. I mean, Juan Davis could be one play away from being a significant contributor to Texas. Now, Casey Kane, he's in there now with A.D. Mitchell and Isaiah Nair. You got to see the future though too. I mean, if you like where you are, you like your teammates, you like your coach, your position coach, obviously at receiver they have a new position coach in Chris Jackson. Then you're willing to wait your turn, and that's what I've been so impressed with Steve Sarkisian. Honestly, that he has been able to keep some of those young talented players, um, in the system, growing, waiting for their opportunity. Jaron Thompson's gonna, he'll have a COVID decision after this next season, but then it's time. It's time for Larry Turner Gooden or Derek Williams or BJ Allen or um, these young guys to take over. And
Hmm.
and so let's see if the trend is going up. I mean, look at all the young corners. They got to play. And even a guy like Savion Bryce, who's long and fast and all the things you want, you hear great things about. Um, he didn't get to play that much. Austin Jordan got to play. Jalen Gilbo got to play. Terrence Brooks got to play. But if again, you like your position coach, you can see that there are guys ahead of you who are about to leave, then you keep going, you keep growing. And Texas was pretty fortunate last year, Taylor, with injuries. I mean, they had some guys go out of games, but they didn't have season-ending injuries throughout the year, and so
Yeah.
um, it makes it tougher to get playing time if the guys ahead of you are healthy the whole time. Obviously, that's what the fans want and what the coaches want. But I think it's been impressive that Sark's been able to hold the young talent together, and this will be another big year for that. Especially on that defensive line, because that's where you've got to have depth. You got to be able to rotate. Uh, three. Well, you got to be able to rotate six defensive tackles. The great teams can do that. So, and that's what they're positioned to do this upcoming season. So let's see how they handle it.
Yeah, I'm looking here at the 24/7 Sports transfer portal for Texas. They, from the end of November through January, lost 14 players, and I would say to the transfer portal, and I would say probably only one of those players Sark would have loved to have held on to, and that was Hudson Card. The rest of the guys, and this isn't a knock on those guys or anything, it essentially was they were in the position where they didn't see them contributing, because there's younger talent like a Junior Angelau, for instance. I mean, he missed the year because of a fall camp season-ending injury, but then you look at how well the offensive line performed without him, and they're all young guys. I mean, he would have to be competing with true sophomores at some of those positions. So, and maybe even redshirt freshmen if he would have stuck around. So, I mean, I think 14 to the transfer portal, but only one of them really was probably one that the coaches would have loved to have held on to. The rest, they probably essentially told them maybe go find another place to make an impact. That's huge. And you're right. The fact that he's been able to hold on to guys that they want on the roster is enormous. I mean, that's something that, happens at Alabama, but look at what Alabama has been doing. They've been winning or playing for championships pretty much every other year. It seems like, at least, if not more. Texas hasn't been in that situation. The fact that they've been able to hold on to the young talent is huge. I mean, deserves a ton of credit by Steve Sarkisian and the staff, no doubt about it.
Yeah.
All right, let's do a question here from the YouTube channel. Sorry, let me get over here. Let's see. Let's do a Chris Jackson question here. This is from JH2222. What effect will Chris Jackson, have on Quinn's numbers / passing game in general?
Well, I think if Chris Jackson is as good as we think he is, as a up and coming rising star receivers coach who had really good success, obviously in Jacksonville. Now he was working with Christian Kirk and Zay Jones, who are and Marvin Jones Jr., who are experienced guys, but they had good years. Jacksonville with uh, Trevor Lawrence, making the playoffs, winning a playoff game. That that's what you hope, that he brings confidence to that position, and confident players on the field with a confident quarterback. That's when you're moving the football and you're making big plays, and that's what you want. And so, I think he can have a solid impact. And this is a year where everyone's going to be watching that receiver room and expecting big things. So I think that's why Sark went out and hired a guy who's done it at the highest level in the NFL, where you've got to you face your division opponents twice a year. You've got to have new wrinkles. You've got to be you got to have a big skill set. And so, yeah, I think Chris Jackson, if he's doing his job, the receiver room is going to be prolific and productive. The quarterback has to be able to go through his progression and know where to look. And that's where I think the biggest impact will, room for improvement will occur, more than what Chris Jackson does with the receivers. Although, again, they got to be good. They got to be able to get off the line. They got to be able to beat press coverage, and Chris Jackson's got to train them how to read their option reads and be on the same page with the quarterback so that the offense is moving. But I think everyone's going to look at that receiver room and see how productive it is.
Yeah, I agree. And honestly, with Quinn being second year in the system too, he may make Chris Jackson look like a genius, honestly, too, as a receivers coach, because you expect Quinn to take that next step, similar to Sam Ellinger did, from year 1 to year 2, when Texas went to the Sugar Bowl against Georgia and upset Georgia, and that Sam took a major leap from his throwing, his passing game. And so, I think, assuming Quinn does take that next step, Chris Jackson's going to look like a genius. And but it's interesting, the fact that Sark did go for a receivers coach that was more of a technician, when typically receivers and cornerbacks coach at the college level are typically the coaches that are elite recruiters and good on-field coaches too, but recruiting is, kind of their bread and butter a little bit. Sark went in a different direction for this hire, and we'll see how it works, but there's not much reason to doubt it, considering, as you said, Chris Jackson's done this at the highest level with professionals and with some really elite receivers. So yeah, this is it's going to be fun to watch. I would say that if you're, especially if you're a fan of offense, I think this could be a fun offense to watch for Texas.
Taylor, I see that question from the YouTube from Terry Reynolds.
Oh yeah.
And let's grab that, because Malik Murphy, and I haven't mentioned Malik. This is a big spring for Malik Murphy. He's healthy. And he was not healthy last year. He came in after having ankle surgery. He broke his ankle in December, and was an early enrollee. So he went through this, he came in January. He was still in a boot following ankle surgery. It was it's a long recovery. He was not cleared until he got into the season. And then he, hurt his wrist in a scooter accident. It was kind of not, I don't want to say a lost year, because he was in all the meetings. He knew what he was learning, the offense, and that's key. But this is a big year for Malik Murphy. He needs to, he needs to show these coaches that he's got the offense down, because he and Quinn Ewers have been in this offense the same amount of time, and Malik Murphy is a giant. I mean,
Yeah.
he's almost 6'6". He's 245. He's got the charisma, the personality, and he needs to prove to these coaches that he's in it to win it, and that'll start this spring. And so, he's you asked, does he have a legitimate chance to be the starter? Has he been written off? No, he has a legitimate chance to be the starter. He's gonna have to beat out Quinn Ewers and Arch Manning, and that, talk about healthy competition. But Malik Murphy is not a shrinking violet. He is a confident dude. So he's not afraid of this competition. And I'm excited to see what he brings to the table. I like Hudson Card early on. I wasn't sure how confident he was, how much swag he had when he went out on the field. He developed it, and I think he showed it last year, and
Right.
now we'll see what he does at Purdue. I hope he kills it. But Malik Murphy's a confident guy. I mean, everyone talks about him having the biggest personality in the locker room. So yeah, this is a big spring for Malik Murphy, and then it's on Steve Sarkisian to give an honest evaluation of these quarterbacks and make sure that he's playing the best one. So, you know, everyone talked about Malik Murphy being raw when he came out of high school. Okay, AJ Milwie's had time to mold him with his mechanics and in this offense. Steve Sarkisian, same. So we should see that this spring. We should start to see that.
Yeah, and that's the thing with Malik Murphy. He was raw, but he had a really high ceiling coming out of high school. He didn't get as many game reps as you would expect, of a D1 college football quarterback coming in, especially, 2020, the football season in the state of California did not happen. So he was, I would say, a little bit behind from a developmental standpoint when he did arrive at Texas, plus, having the injury too that he was working through. But his ceiling's really high. There's a reason why he was a very highly rated recruit, even though he still needed game reps. And if you look at Greg Biggins, 24/7 Sports national recruiting analyst, his scouting report on Malik Murphy was essentially that. I mean, this guy, he has all the tools and he just needs game reps to really, hone in on the details and kind of perfect the tools that he was gifted with, just natural ability that he has. So it's going to be really interesting. And when Chip says he's like almost 6'6", he legitimately is. I mean, that's not like padding the stats type of roster thing where he's going to go to like the combine and all of a sudden it's like, oh, he's 6'2". It's like, nope, this kid is all of 6'5", if not 6'6". I had a source, and I can't remember if it was spring football or fall camp prior to last season, though, called me after they were at a practice and they were like, uh, yeah, who is number 6? Because I saw him walk in and I'm like, why is this tight end wearing a black jersey? And it was Malik Murphy because he's just such, I mean, didn't even know who it was and just had to call me and ask me about that quarterback because he thought it was legitimately a tight end that was wearing a black jersey. And he thought that was weird that a tight end would wear a black jersey. I'm like, no, it's a quarterback. And yeah, he's a monster. So yeah, he's a specimen for sure just from looking at him, and then it'll be interesting to see kind of him on the field because we didn't get to see it very much in fall camp or anything last year.
Right, right. There's another question about, has he played in a full contact scrimmage? No, I mean, he didn't.
Mm.
He was not cleared during the fall camp last year, and certainly wasn't cleared during the spring. So, we're going to see him this spring, and we'll hear how it's going, and so it should be fun. This is an important year for Malik Murphy.
Yeah, it absolutely is. All right, here's a question from Jess Crawford, Horns 24/7 member. What are your expectations from the O-line this year if everyone stays healthy? Who do you think the starting O-line will be?
Well, I think the offensive line with Calvin Banks at left tackle, and then Hayden Connor did a nice job at left guard, and Jake Majors at center, and then Cole Hudson at right guard, and Christian Jones at right tackle. But you want to see that next wave: Cam Williams at right tackle, DJ Campbell at the guard position, pushing Cole Hudson, pushing Hayden Connor. Um, Connor Robertson, we know, is already in the three deep, two deep, really, at center. He's the backup to Jake Majors, or he was at the Alamo Bowl. Um, and Cole Hudson can play center as well. And then, Malik Agbo, Nato Umazulu, those guys need to keep pushing because
Mhm.
not only are they one play away, but these are big dudes. I mean, and they can move. And Cam Williams. I mean, it would not shock me if Cam Williams beats out Christian Jones to be the right tackle of this football team, and Christian Jones ends up, moving to guard or something. But it also would not shock me if Cam Williams was the backup left tackle and spent most of his time over there. They're going to have to see where he's more comfortable. We learned from Christian Jones, he started an entire season at left tackle, and it did not go well
No.
in 21. And they moved him to the right side, and he was much more comfortable. The footwork, his kick step, everything was more comfortable on the right side than it was on the left side. And kudos to Kyle Flood for figuring that out. But um, I'm the guys I just mentioned are the easy, ones to say you think will be the offensive line starters: Calvin Banks, Hayden Connor, Jake Majors, Cole Hudson, and Christian Jones, because they're all returning. But it
Right,
would
yeah.
not shock me. It would not shock me if Cam Williams beat out Christian Jones at that right tackle position. If Cam Williams has progressed the way we've heard he was progressing coming out of last season. So it's on these players to keep pushing um, and to improve. But it wouldn't surprise me. That's a big dude.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure. And we don't get to talk to assistant coaches very often, but we did get the chance to speak to Kyle Flood at the Alamo Bowl. And when we did some of the breakout, interviews with him, he talked extensively about Cam Williams um, being a guy that people have not seen it publicly, the progress that he was making, but he said it a couple of times. That was a guy that he continued to mention and bring up when talking about the young offensive linemen, because he thought, he was really impressed with the way that he was progressing. He was like, he's got to continue. He's got to, continue to get better and kind of just work more on some of his physical tools. But he did mention Cam Williams that a number of times in the breakout interviews as a guy that has made a ton of progress. You just haven't seen it because he wasn't on the field a lot last season or anything. But that's definitely one to watch. And I think the expectations, I agree with you. The starting O line at this point is probably what you had said, but I think the expectations are high, honestly, for the O line, and that's a huge credit to Kyle Flood because of what he was able to do with a very, very green, inexperienced offensive line last year that we thought was going to be a liability, and it wasn't. I mean, I had no problem eating crow on that because I know Kyle Flood's a great coach. He's a great recruiter. He's a great developer of talent, but he himself even said at Alamo Bowl, he's never been in a situation where he had to start one true freshman, let alone two true freshmen on the offensive line for an entire season. And they performed really well, and he deserves a ton of credit for that. So, because of how well they performed last year, I think the expectations are high and understandably so, and they should be. And you want that, and that goes back to kind of what I was saying earlier about this team being built to make a run for a Big 12 title this season because of the way that they've been able to not just recruit on both lines of scrimmage, but develop those guys. And the offensive line last year was a prime example of that. And with all those guys returning, it's, next step. You want to see it. And you want to see some of those younger guys that maybe they hadn't seen push some of the veteran guys. So, yeah,
Yeah.
man, I can't believe I'm saying that Texas offensive line should be a strength. When have I ever said that? Like,
Hey,
never.
'cause you haven't seen a guy like Kelvin Banks very often come
Oh,
in
yeah.
and play at an all-conference level as a true freshman. That for Texas fans, that was like watching a unicorn run out on the field all season long. It was great. And those are the kind of players that Alabama and Clemson and Ohio State have been getting. And now Texas has Kelvin Banks, and he's probably going to end up being a top, 10 pick in the NFL draft when he's ready to come out. And that's the kind of success you need to have in recruiting. You need to be able to say, look at Kelvin Banks. Basketball's been able to say, look at, Kevin Durant. But in football, you need NFL players at every position group. I mean, they can point to Devin Duvernay and and soon Bijan Robinson, but on the offensive line, to be able to attract top offensive linemen, you need to be able to show you can put guys in the NFL.
Yeah, the only thing
Taylor,
people pointed to for the offensive line for the last decade plus at Texas was how few offensive linemen were
right,
actually drafted. That's why so many of the top prospects in the state of Texas went elsewhere,
right,
because of that.
that's
So,
right. Do you see the question from Cisco Diaz and the
uh, yeah, let me pull this up over here. All right. Let's see. Chip, look at you, looking through the comments and stuff. I'm very
I know,
impressed.
I
Talk about
know.
taking the next step. Chip, normally would be like, "Where are the comments?" And the fact that you're calling them out, I like that. Oh, yeah, here we go. Uh, the one about Gary Patterson?
Yeah.
All right, yeah. Cisco Diaz here. Any news on GP Gary Patterson staying on the staff, or is he officially gone? How different is this defense if he's gone? Chip's been
So
reporting on this a lot, so I'll let you take the lead on this one.
yeah, so Gary Patterson is still working as a special assistant to Steve Sarkisian. And by all accounts, it will continue into the 2023 football season unless, um, Gary Patterson either has a better offer um, or his wife tells him it's time to slow down. So, um, yeah, he took part in the junior day. He is back to evaluating recruits. He's helping oversee winter conditioning just like he did at this time last year. So um, that's good news. And I know there was some question about whether Gary would continue, but he is still continuing to be a special assistant to Steve Sarkisian. So that's good news for Texas because his scouting, his advanced scouting, his ability to help them um, with the quarters match, pass defense that Pete Kwiatkowski employed last year was huge. And then the advanced scouting is where Gary is special. He does that himself. It was what made him a really top end defensive coach at TCU. He loves diving in, studying opposing offenses and coming up with game plans. And and so the the more longer you can have Gary Patterson helping you out, the more Texas fans should be cheering because you saw his impact on the TCU game last year when they held TCU to, well, what, 17 points?
17, yeah.
Um, that
That was a
was
season low for TCU too, I think. Well, regular season low, I believe.
right. It was phenomenal. I mean, the Texas defense, uh, they did not lose that game. The offense couldn't do a thing, and Bijan Robinson, you had first and goal from the 2, first and goal from the 5, and Bijan Robinson didn't get a single touch in either of those series. So tough day for the offense that day.
Yeah. And I think one of the biggest things too that is a really big positive, I think, for the defensive staff is the fact that I think a lot of people thought Gary Patterson was hired to essentially be Pete Kwiatkowski's replacement if the defense struggled again for a second year after the struggles that it had in year one. But from everything we've heard, they work fantastically together. It wasn't a situation where PK was like looking over his shoulder thinking that Gary Patterson was like defensive coordinator and waiting or anything like that. They were able to rely upon one another, and it wasn't in a way that you would think maybe could have been tumultuous a little bit, or kind of like when in 2019 when Tom Herman, after Chris Ash was fired from Rutgers, had him just come in some of the defensive meetings to be a kind of help as an analyst, but like a unpaid just like volunteer type of thing. I mean, the defensive staff was like all looking over their shoulders, and understandably so, considering Tom Herman did fire Todd Orlando to hire Chris Ash later. It was nothing like that with Gary Patterson this year, and that's I think that's something that doesn't get talked about enough, and probably should, because it shows that there is a trust in in that room, and the more that those staff can like rely on a guy like Gary Patterson, the better it's going to be for the outcome on the field. And you saw that, I think, last year.
Yeah, and remember, Gary, he's talked about this, and I wrote about it. He wants to be in the College Football Hall of Fame. He's got the credentials to get in, but you have to be out 3 years from coaching to get in. And he's not hustling for a job right now. He's content. He told me, and I wrote it in June when his song "The Day I Walk Away" came out. He said, "I like going to these meetings and knowing that when the meeting's over, Sark has to go solve the problem, not
Yeah.
me." And he loves being a part of the camaraderie with the staff. And if the rule change goes through, that we thought might go through in August, but might go through, at some point before this upcoming football season, where any institutional staffer can coach during the week, then you've got Gary Patterson able to, and let's be honest, I mean, some of these guys are probably coaching already during the week, but um, Gary's not hustling for a job. He's happy to work with Pete Kwiatkowski and this staff, and he's a team player, man. I know I used to talk to Gary Patterson a lot when he was the coach at TCU, and Sark's got him on lockdown. I'm like, he's doing what Sark wants him to do. Kind of annoys me, but it's he's a good team player.
Yeah, he is. All right, I'm going to take another one here from the YouTube real quick from Nicholas Tomsma. I apologize if I butchered that. Does Jalen Ford have a chance to be Big 12 Defensive Player of the Year, or is the league too jaded against Texas? He's the honorary Big 12 Defensive Player of the Year in my opinion, from last season. He got hosed, I think, in that the voting there. Maybe it was intentional, maybe not. I don't know. But what are your thoughts, Chip?
Yeah, it's certainly worth bringing up. I mean, I don't know how you didn't give it to Jalen Ford last year. So maybe the league is too jaded. Now, you're bringing in Cincinnati, Central Florida, Houston, and BYU. They shouldn't be jaded toward Texas because they're new to the whole thing.
They should be
So,
thanking Texas and OU for leaving, because now they're in a
right.
Power 5 conference.
So hopefully if Jalen Ford has the same kind of year he had a year ago, or maybe even a little better, I'm not going to put a ceiling on the guy, they'll give him the award because that's voted on by the coaches. And you could see where there might have been a little, well, let's take care of our guy at Kansas State Felix Anudike-Uzomah, who's really a good player, but he didn't have the impact that Jalen Ford had in big games. And so, yeah, let's hope that the coaches do the right thing if Jalen Ford has a similar season to last year or better, and give him the award. My God, 4 interceptions, 3 forced fumbles, 2 fumble recoveries. He was top 3 in tackles all year. It was a big year.
Yeah. Yeah, and you hope he continues too, because he was weighing his options of either, returning or going to the NFL as an underclass, leaving early, excuse me, for the 2023 NFL draft. He ended up, from what my sources said, he was, there's an importance that his family wanted him to get a degree, and also he hadn't gotten NIL money in last season, but I think Texas may have maybe helped facilitate or maybe put his name in front of some people that did some NIL deals with him. But he deserved it. I mean, that's he had that type of season that he was earning of the NIL deals, and now I think that those did come. So um,
And
that's
that's what you do. You you let your school know you're thinking about transferring or going to the NFL, and suddenly the NIL money shows up.
yeah.
You have a year like that, and you're allowed. I mean, Xavier Worthy had, double-digit touchdowns as a freshman. He's gonna get some NIL money. Jalen Ford has
Mhm.
a year like that. He's gonna get some NIL money, and
Yeah,
that's the way it should be,
it should
honestly.
be. Yeah,
Don't promise it up front. Come in, earn it. It'll be there, and and
it's not pay for play. That was what the NCAA was trying to avoid, even though they haven't pretty much done anything to restrict it. But it
well,
was
and one
to
thing we
earn
haven't
it.
really talked about is the new rule that the NCAA has instituted, where if you don't cooperate, if you don't turn over all the materials that the NCAA infractions committee wants to look at, they will assume you're hiding something. And so this is uh, this is a totally new approach from the NCAA, which does not have subpoena power. But if this is their way around subpoena power, if they come, based on what they read in a article or what they hear from another school reporting it to them, and they come asking questions, they want to see everything.
They
Otherwise, they're
want
going to
receipts.
assume
Yeah,
you're hiding something and you will be punished. So this is their attempt to put teeth into the NIL wild, wild west. And we'll see how this plays. How, how aggressive are they in doing this? Are they going after the big schools? Um, it's one thing for it to be a rule. It's another thing for it to be enforced. The NCAA hasn't been enforcing much of anything. So we'll see.
yeah, and that is an interesting rule too, because as Chip said, it could be a report out there and they can then come. So these schools now essentially need to be saving all receipts for NIL money, and be willing and ready to hand them over if the NCAA infractions committee does come. It's going to be weird too, Chip. I'm curious for your thoughts on this. As journalists, there's a lot of things we have to be careful and make sure that we have solid intel from sources. If you're not naming sources, to avoid things like libel or defamation or anything along those lines. As a reporter, I'm kind of like, that's at some point, or, if somebody were to report something and it was incorrect, can the schools go after the reporter if they
I
get
mean,
infractions? I mean, it's like, I don't know.
yeah, I mean, I think it would be um, anything's possible in this day and
Mhm.
age, and so I wouldn't be surprised by just about anything.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, we've heard some crazy NIL stories already,
Yeah.
and and I know there a number of programs have said we've got to rein this in, and so this we're getting a new head of the NCAA, and we're getting some new some new guidelines. So we'll see how this plays out.
Yeah. All right, Chip, you want to wrap it up here?
Yeah, let's. We probably gone longer than we expected, but the questions have kept coming, so that means we need to do this more often.
Yeah,
So
these are fun too. I like interacting with our members and the viewers over at the YouTube channel and Facebook too. We appreciate you guys chiming in and listening to us babble on and on here for an hour and 25 minutes. Doesn't seem like it's been that long, but it's been fun.
yeah, informed babble, right?
Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Um, yeah. So thanks everybody. Make sure you're subscribed to the Horns 24/7 YouTube channel. It should be that subscribe button right below where you're looking. Just hit that, and that way you'll get notices whenever we're doing our mailbag live flagship podcasts, and tell all your friends and enemies to subscribe as well. And until next time, we'll see you over at horns247.com. For Taylor Estes, I'm Chip Brown. Thanks so much for participating, for listening, for watching this edition of the Flagship Podcast. Stay safe and keep the faith.